Welcome back to another episode of Black Hat Python. In this one, we will be building out some functionality piece by piece as we enter the next chapter of the book for our key, not our keylogger, but for our Trojan. And the first feature we're going to add is the keylogger functionality. So we're just going to build this by itself and test it out, get it working before integrating it with our Trojan if we so choose. So you might notice things look a little bit different right now, and that is because I am in my Windows VM, the Commando VM that we set up, the Mandiant Commando. And the reason I'm doing that is this keylogger is made to run on Windows, so it has a bunch of Windows API modules, or modules that work with the native Windows API. And so I can't really test that on a Linux box, obviously, because that API doesn't exist on Linux, just a Windows API. So I decided to build it on this machine. So really convenient that we had that set up already. So as you see here, and I don't know why they included to import OS. In this case, we're not even using OS, but oh well, we'll leave it for now. But yeah, we're using C types, which is a module that will allow you to use a lot of code from C that was ported over to Python, which is really useful for working with Windows API stuff like the WinDLL, as you see here. That one's going to be really important. And the string IO, which is something pretty interesting as well, right? Say you don't know like what this is, string IO. You just look it up, right? This is what it's all about. It's about Googling stuff as you don't know it. Same with pen testing, right? We're going to have to Google a lot of stuff. And I think a lot of people get frustrated with this book because they don't explain every little thing. If they did, this book would be insanely dense because there's just so much going on, right? I mean, if we look through, going back to this, we look through this, right? Imagine if they explained every single line. That would be so tedious and cumbersome. So instead, it's kind of on you to look this stuff up. So say we don't know what the string IO module does in Python, then we can just Google it. And we see here the string IO module is an in-memory file-like object. This object can be used as input or output to most function that would expect a standard file object, right? So let's just take this a step further, you know? Let's say that, okay, that sounds good, but I still don't know what it does. You know, until I use it, I don't know what it's doing. Okay. Well, what we could do is, they give us some code. So let's just run that in the interactive Python terminal, right? This is like, make use of the tools that you have available is what I'm trying to say. So make use of the interactive terminal, right? So we do something like from IO, import string IO. If I can type it here. And let's just create a string variable and say, this is the initial string. And I spilled coffee on my last keyboard. If you're wondering why the typing's so much louder, I'm actually using a different keyboard. I'm using a blue switch, so I don't know how much that's picking up on the mic, but just thought I'd throw that out there. This is a temporary thing until I get a new one, but file equals string IO. And we could pass this a string, right? That's something that it says, right? We could pass a string in here if we want to, but we don't have to. So if we go back up here, when it's created, it's initialized by passing a string to the constructor. If no string is passed, the string IO will start empty. In both cases, the initial cursor on the file starts at 0. So let's test this out. Say we don't pass in a string. It's empty, right? So if we do a file.read, which will convert this to a string, we'll see it's empty. Now, we could write a string to it as well, later on adding the string. So we can say, welcome to elevatecyber. And now when we do a file.read, we will actually see something interesting here. You'll see that it shows as empty, but that's because our cursor is now at the index after this is written, like the index like right here, right after the R in cyber. So from that point on, we're seeing nothing. we can change the index back to the 0 index by doing a file.seek 0. So now if I do a file.read, we should see the string, and now we do. So the other way we could have initialized this, right, is when we created the, where is it? When we took an instance of the string IO class, we could pass in, or maybe that's not exactly what we did, but we could pass in a string here, right? So if we do that, if we do a file.read on the string, we'll see this is an initial string, and I spelled initial wrong. I just now realized that, but yeah, we could add to this too, right? We could do the file.write again, right? We can keep appending to this, right? Because remember I said we're at the end of the cursor each time it moves the cursor. So looks like my my thing is hanging. But basically what you would see is if I move the seek to 0 and I did a file.read, then I would see this is an initial string. Welcome to elevatecyber. That's what it would say. I don't know why this is hanging. It might be my VM actually. No, it looks like it's just this window. I can kill this terminal here. We'll just kill it. But yeah, so now hopefully you guys understand that. And yeah, there's callback functions here, something we'll get to in a second. Now, if we just start from here, right, from our main essentially, first thing we're going to do is call the run method. This is pretty much the same method as we were using in the previous video in the series. So we're going to, save the standard out from sysstandard out into this variable here. So once again, if you don't know what any of this stuff is, you can break it down in the terminal. You can Google it. I don't want this video to go too crazy long, so I'll leave that to you. But basically, it's just looking at the standard out and it's assigning it to this variable. And then we're going to, create the, start up the string IO as we saw in the interactive terminal and assign that to sys.standardout. So basically, it's an empty string right now. It's empty, completely empty, because we didn't pass anything in initially. So the cursor's just at index 0, just waiting for input. So we're basically just initializing stuff here. Now, KL is going to create a, instance of the keylogger class. So it's going to run the init function here and set the current window to none. That's all it's going to do for right then and there. Now, this is the part that is doing so much more than it might appear. This is the PyHook hook manager. And essentially what's happening with this thing is that it's abstracting a lot of lower level stuff for us. Now, that's another thing that we can look into. But it's taking care of a lot of low level programming, and then that will leave us to be able to write just the core logic. So if we take a look at this, because this part's really important, you can see here on GitHub, there's some code here. And in particular, let's go back here for a sec. We're looking at hook manager, right? That's this. So all this code basically getting run. It's setting hooks. So what hooks are is it's going to listen for events, right? So as you see down here, hook keyboard. This is the part that's calling it, right? So with this, we're just kind of initializing it as HM. So we are we're getting all the stuff loaded in. So now we have, like when we run this here, we now have access. Our program has access to all of these functions, whichever ones we want to use. We have access to all of this. That's basically what's happening here. And now it's going to, here's where the callback method happens. KL my keystroke, which is this thing here, and hm.keydown. So if a key is pressed, it's going to go into my keystroke. And when we say hook keyboard, this is where we're having it listen for keyboard events. Oh, nice. We can actually hover over this and it'll tell us, in this case, right? Begins watching for keyboard events. That's like the part, right? So if you look at hook keyboard, you can actually find this function here. So def hook keyboard begins watching for keyboard events. And this is what it's doing under the hood to actually do that. So basically with this, you'll watch the keyboard event, and probably the best way to see this is to use the debugger. Like I say, use the tools that you have available to you. So if we set a breakpoint right here, we can see exactly when we step into my keystroke. Now, one adjustment I made for demo purposes is to change the timeout from 600 to 30 seconds instead of 600 seconds. Just because it'll complete faster and we can see. Because one thing that happens with this program is that it doesn't actually show you the output from the string IO until the timeout is reached, right? So it's going to withhold that until it's actually done running, and then it will dump it to the terminal for us to view the output. That's just how they have it written. So we will run a debug here. And if we notice here, we just wait. If we just wait and wait, it's just going to run until it times out if I don't press anything, you know? But the second that I press a key, it stops because we hit this breakpoint. So that is what the HM hook keyboard thing is doing, just listening for keyboard events, right? Press a key, and now we can see all this information here. We can see, okay, we were 10 seconds in out of the 30 when we pressed the key. That's the current time of, according to this, time.thread time. And that's less than 30 seconds, so it's still running. And now you can see all kinds of different stuff here. We can even go into the globals here and look at the global variables. We can really start drilling down to look at whatever we want to look at. The debugger is super handy. I definitely recommend to use it if you aren't currently. And once we get here, what's going to happen, right? So the first thing it's going to look for is to see if we change to a different window. So what does that mean? That means like if we go into Notepad or into the command prompt, it's going to tell us where the user actually is, or if they're in Firefox, and it's going to get the process that's running, right? So that's all this code up here. It's going to get the foreground window. These are all using Windows APIs, or basically Python modules to work with those Windows APIs. So this is something that, like, if you start looking through the Windows API documentation in the Python version of this, then you can determine exactly what you need to do and how you need to do it. So definitely, I'll leave that to you because there would be a lot to go through. But basically, it's getting the PID, the process ID of what the user is using. It's getting the name of what they are using. Like, it'll say Notepad exe and the process ID and stuff like that. You'll see in a minute when I run it, as I always say on these. But if it can't determine it, it'll tell you that the window name is unknown. And yeah, it's just grabbing all that information. And then when, after it does that, and in the event that it's not in a new window, either way, it's going to go to this next check here, which is looking for all of the keys on the keyboard. That is why it's between 32 and 127. Now, let me just stop this for a sec. I'll show you what that means. If you don't know what that means, once again, use the Python interpreter that we have available to us. If we do CHR 32, which will be out of this range, right? We can see it is actually the blank character here, blank string. Now, if we look at the very next one, we can actually see it's a keyboard character. It is the exclamation point. And so everything in between these are the different keys we could press, like all the letters, all the numbers, all of that stuff, lowercase, uppercase, and the special characters on your keyboard. So if we look at the upper range of this, we can see 127. Actually, that's out of the range. That's one out of the range, right? We don't care about logging these, right? We just want to log the keys. So that's why everything in between 32 and 127 will be actual keyboard keys. That's what we care about, so that's what we're going to print to the screen. And you see, normally print adds the new line, but we don't want each character pressed to be entered in on a new line. So if it's a keyboard character, we want to print that all out on the same line so we can easily read it, right? And the next thing it's going to check, and this is another really cool feature of this, is going to look to see if the key press was a Control-V to paste. So if it was, then we're actually going to open their clipboard and dump the contents of their clipboard to the terminal as well. So I'll demo that, of course. And else, if the key pressed was not in this range and it was not Control V, then, probably it's like something like a space bar or enter key or backspace or something like that. We're just going to go ahead and log that on its own line. And when we're done, we're going to return true. And so basically this is what's going to keep happening until it hits the timeout. And once it hits timeout is when it's going to pump waiting messages. Now, what is that? That's a built-in thing from the PyCom module. And we can look that up here, right? It's an integer, and it pumps all waiting messages for the current thread. So this is a COM thing, basically. And really, depending on how much you want to drill down into this, you can see this info here on what this is, right? So it's waiting for a message to say that, hey, everything, all the events are done being signaled, right? Oops. Yeah, it's basically going to close out waiting for events is what you need to know. And there's Windows 32 API references, all that. So that's what's happening there. And after it does that, we're just going to get the values from standard out. We're basically going to dump all this stuff to the console here. And so what we can see is that go down here, it'll print done at the end. So that's pretty much all the code. Let's go ahead and run it and actually demonstrate how it works, right? So what I can do is let's say Python keylogger.py. And let's say we come in here and we paste something. In this case, this is a test, new line. And well, I guess if I type a bunch of things on the same thing, then we'll see that all in one. If we open the command prompt, hello, or say, who am I? Can start typing stuff. Should see that the command prompt was open, hopefully here. And then, we'll just wait for this to finish. Cool. And I think it was how I opened the command prompt. I think when I clicked down here on the link, it didn't actually grab it, which is interesting. But yeah, we can test that again here in a sec. But we did see that it found Notepad, right? It was like, okay, they are in the Notepad window, gave us the PID and notepad.exe, even the title of the document. And we can see everything that was pressed here. And we can see the pasted buffer here. So paste, and then what was pasted from our clipboard. So, and then you can see all the stuff here, all the characters that I typed. So if I typed a character that was in that range, it did not terminate it with a new line. If it was outside of that range, like the space bar, it did print that, it did add the new line afterwards. So, and if we typed a bunch of things with no spaces, then there you go as well. One thing we might want to add to this is instead of, we could make an exception to say if the character is spacebar, then don't add the new line either, and don't even print space. That way, like if we typed, this line, for example, would all be on the same line. That's something we could add, but, we'll leave this for now. And if I run this one last time, let me just verify something. I think if I open command prompt from here, for whatever reason, it will be able to grab it. So who am I? Let's see, dir echo cd. Just running a few commands here so we can grab it, have some output to look at here. But yeah, it should register that we opened the command prompt. For whatever reason, when I was clicking on the favorite down here, it wasn't able to detect it. Maybe something to look at if we really wanted to make this production ready. But yeah, here we go. Yeah, and you see here, it even registered that we typed into the search down here. So that's pretty interesting. And command.exe Command prompt. There we go. So awesome. Yeah, let me know if there's any questions about this down in the comment section below. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this one. In the future, we can integrate this with our Trojan bot. So definitely a lot of cool things in store, but for now, we're going to build out even more functionality in the coming videos. So be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit the like button as well to help out in the algorithms. And use this responsibly, guys. Don't use this for any malicious purposes. You know, use it for malicious purposes if you're a red teamer, right, on an engagement where you have authorization to do so. But yeah, I just wanted to throw in that disclaimer there. But yeah, if you're eager to watch some more videos and get caught up in the series, go ahead and check out the Black Hat Python videos on screen right now. See you guys right over there. Thanks for watching.